How to podcast seriously. Welcome to the Marketing Club. Welcome to the We Don't Play podcast show. Welcome to the space where you listen, you learn, you live, and you earn. The more you learn, the more you earn. So, this is where you, as a business owner, can thrive and you can definitely take a lot of great things to the next level if you decide to build these specific tools for yourself, for your business, and do it the right way. So, we're going to talk about how to podcast seriously. This is going to be something that I am super excited to share with you because this is something that I'm going to be doing, and it's not just going to be something I'll be talking about here on Clubhouse. You'll also be listening to it on the podcast. You'll also be seeing it in your email. You'll also be seeing it on Google. You'll be seeing it on Spotify. You'll be seeing it when you're listening to music. It's something that you're going to be paying attention to. And this is something I'm going to be explaining and giving you insight on. So welcome to the room. Minnie, Queen, Chan, and also Bring. Thank you for being here. I'm excited about today because why I picked this topic and why I even saw this topic is not just because I wanted to say how to podcast seriously. This is actually a keyword. Let me just let me say that again. This is a keyword. A keyword. A keyword is a phrase, a saying, a word that is used to show interest in something. So, for a long time, I've been trying to figure out okay, I want to have podcast as something that people can, learn because everybody is doing a podcast. Everybody has a podcast. But in my mind, I'm like, okay, I want to do something that is very helpful. And at the same time, it's something that people can find helpful. And I said, okay, how am I going to put the word podcast? Because, yeah, podcast SEO, that's cool. You can find that in the module. But I was like, what's going to be the phrase? What's going to be the word that people want to, get on? So the questions people are asking is, how often should I podcast? Right? How podcast started? What does podcast really matter? Who listens to podcasts? These are questions that people are asking. So I decided I'm going to talk about podcasts seriously, and that's going to be a training. So if you want to learn about podcasting and you're serious about it, this is something that I have learned in 6 years, and I'm teaching you all these things and saving you 6 years of research and putting it into 1 year. Because podcasting it's easy, but it's also not easy because some people find it easy, some people don't, depending on, how does it work? Some people say podcast topics for adults, right? That's questions people are asking. Podcast topics for kids, podcast topics for students, podcast topics for business owners. Those are questions that we'll be asking. So I felt like it would make sense to bring information and show how you can actually podcast and do it in a really, really good way and in a serious way. Because honestly, if I think someone said this, and I'll find the link and I'm going to send it I'll actually share it with you guys today. Because, hey, Valerie, welcome, and Cito as well. When you look at, I'll find it. Yeah, I just remembered it. So when I think about podcasting, yeah, I got it. On average, this is when May, right? So I'm giving you stats for April 2025. I'm going to put the link in the chat so you can follow me as well if you want to see what I'm saying. All right, boom. The link is in the chat. When you scroll down, there's a section that says chances of success and failure as a podcaster. I want to just dwell on this part real quick, because if you're looking at this and you're being very serious as a podcaster and you're listening to this, this is something that as a business owner you will thrive successfully, you will do so well successfully, and it's 11:11 as well. You will be so successful if you go above the threshold when no one's listening to you on a podcast, but eventually people start listening to you. That's when everything changes, right? I talked about advertising, audio ads versus uh, video ads. And as I'm speaking to you, I've created in fact, I'll play it over for you guys so you can actually listen to it. Yeah, I'll play it for you. Hold on. Give me 1 second so that I can come back with a good sound. 2 seconds. All right, here we go. So what you're about to listen to is I'm so excited about this. What you're about to listen to, welcome Beston and Susan, is before I open this room, I'm just being 100% transparent with you right now, as I am every time I show up in this space. And I want to make sure I give you 100% information so you don't say nothing was taken or nothing was not given. Welcome, Lorna. Welcome, Lynette. I just mixed it's a 3-step process, from a script to a voiceover to background music. And I'm testing this out. And whenever I'm doing these things, and before I did this, I feel like Holy Spirit just ministered to me and said, "Hey, check this out." And funny enough, when I checked my, it's so interesting. Today is May 2nd. And when things happen, I know these things don't happen for happenstance, because I really follow. I'm very, high radar, very sensitive, to spirit. And I looked at my dashboard and I realized that I created 2 drafts in January and February 2025 for Spotify ads, because one of the things I've been thinking about is, okay, how can we monetize further than we already are, but now doing it from the podcast perspective and doing it in a way that you can also podcast seriously, so that you're not just doing it because you have a show to push, but because you have an information or a message to share. So before I open this room, there's something I've been testing out, and I'm giving you guys this 100% transparency. Working on, welcome Monty and Ania and Tom. I was working on a Spotify ad. And why am I working on a Spotify ad? Because my podcast now, from the dashboard, I'm 1 episode away from 500 episodes. So there are bonus episodes, there are trailer episodes, and there are full episodes. So I'm 1 episode away from 500. So now what I want to do is run a test, because Spotify allows you to monetize, right? And if you want to monetize the right way. So I said, okay, God just reminded me, please go back to that Spotify that you said you were going to do in January. It's May. Go back there. And I just saw the draft in my dashboard. I was like, wow, okay, God is speaking. So I now decided, let me go in there. Guess what? They've created a new beta access program at Spotify. On Spotify, you say, oh yeah, Spotify, I'm going to run ads. I have a podcast. You can run Spotify ads to a website. And there's something called a Spotify Pixel. I won't even go into that detail. We'll talk about that on another day, because we're talking about podcasts seriously. So click the link at the top if you want to join the wait list and hear more information about this topic if you are serious about podcasting. So I created an AI. I wrote a script. Spotify has an AI system that you have 2 options. You can either ask Spotify Studio to record a podcast episode for you, or you can use AI right now and do it yourself, where you can write a script, choose a voice, upload your music, mix everything, because I'm in the music industry, and so it's quick for me. So I was able to mix everything. So I'm about to play for you what I just mixed before I open the room. If you guys want to hear it, put a heart in the chat or put a heart on your face. and I'll, share the love back and share that with you. Okay. I love that. Okay, let's go. All right. So you're about to listen to something that I just made. It's about 27 seconds. And if you can hear it, also please put a thumbs up so that if you don't hear it, let me know so that it's clear because I love giving good audio. So in three, dive into the world of engaging discussions with We Don't Play podcast. With over 500 binge-worthy episodes and listeners in 144 countries, this is where powerful conversations unfold. Make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast player. For more, visit wedon'tplaypodcast.com. So you hear that? Thank you so much for the thumbs up. I appreciate that. So what you just listened to is an AI mix of, and I created the music. So I'm a producer. So I made the music, and then I uploaded the audio and mixed it with the AI voiceover because of the script that I gave. And then it gave me to about 27 seconds. And the good thing about music is that when you have music and people are listening on Spotify, especially if the music sounds nice, they'll feel like it makes sense. And then you can also, by the way, let me just say this because I haven't given too much details, but when you now run ads on Spotify, you can run ads and look at the people that they listen to. So let's say you want to, let's say you have top 10 celebrities or top 10 artists or top 10 singers, top 10 musicians. You can target the musicians. And when you target those musicians, right, those musicians are going to be the musicians that will be on the playlist. So let's say I'm listening to Burna Boy or Davido or Kerry Hilson or Whitney Houston, whoever it is, Tasha Cobbs, Kirk Franklin, name them. Whoever you're listening to, you can say, okay, because I'm listening to, let's say, Maverick City on a Sunday, that means I'm going to be using my Spotify playlist on a Sunday morning. So on a Sunday morning, psychologically, I've created an ad that you're going to listen to because I know that you're going to be playing this music at that time. So it's not about who's listening, where, why, all this, keywords. It's specifically focused on performance marketing. Let me say it like that. Because the top three places people listen to podcasts is when they are getting ready for work, for school, for something in the morning, when they're in traffic, or when they're driving, when they're in the car. And then the third one is when they're working out or when they're in the gym or when they're just active. They're maybe taking a walk or they're in the park or they're doing something actively. They may be doing laundry or do whatever it is, walking the dog. You see, doing house chores. Exactly. So people could be, say, hey, Alexa, play the podcast on mindfulness. Da, 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 da. Here's an episode from da, 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 da. That's how it starts. So if you're not using Spotify Premium, you're going to hear this ad on Spotify. So what happens is you listen to this 30-second clip and you're like, and it's not even 30 seconds, it's 27 seconds. And there's a reason why, because because I've worked in radio too before, when you think about the number of seconds when people are paying for slots, like, for slots on radio, those slots are paid in terms of seconds. So it's 15 seconds, 30 seconds, 45 seconds, 60 seconds, right? Those are 4 cycles within 1 minute. So depending on how long it is, if there's anything that's happening between the first to the last 3 seconds before it clips, is where you're able to have everything said because there's a 3 second section that is a segue. That's why when you're playing like Apple Music or Spotify, if you go to your settings on your phone, you'll see a section that says, do you want to play music and sync it in within like 3 seconds, play it like radio, or do you just want to stop, play? So you can either mix it in like a DJ or just, do however you want to play it. So if you do it like that and you're doing it in a very psychological way, thinking about the experience of the listener, then that also changes a lot. So what you just listened to is something that I'm about to put out there. And the link, that picture that you see at the top that says podcast seriously is what you're going to see on on Spotify. So Spotify is going to have that. It's in English. The tagline is ready for marketing tips, question mark. Those are 4 words. And then listen as a call to action button. And then, that way you're able to run the ad. So this is something that I'm going to be doing, and I'll be focusing on this a lot. And Lynette, I'm going to be telling you about this too, because I've been really like diving deep to really like figure out, okay, we need solutions, we need action, we need something to happen. And there's some things I've been seeing, and I'm like, okay, now it's coming back, it's playing back. So we're gonna try this out and see this. And if you've never tried this out and you're listening, and thank you, and you're listening and you have a podcast, there are things that you have to think about. So I've shown you like the candy store. Now let me take you to the factory. All right. So before we do all the wrapping, the packaging, all the good stuff, all the fine stuff, all the things that the edible stuff, let me say it like that. It starts off with the raw material. So how do you podcast seriously? You podcast seriously, and I'll give you 3 steps. One, make sure that every time, and this is a rule of thumb for every podcast out there. Welcome, Shay. Even if you have a YouTube show or a TikTok, whatever you're doing on social media out there, even if it's uploading a reel, as easy as a post, even if it's a picture of yourself, right? That's why on your phone, you have the Photos app and you have the Files app. You have the Files app so you can rename the file before you upload it on a photo. So there's a difference between those two. So when the first rule of thumb is, when you create, this is very important to note, when you create content, whether it's in form of text, audio, video, even if you use Canva, before you export the file, change the file name, especially if you're using a template, or let's say you're making a duplicate, or you're trying to do something, that's custom based. Ensure that you can download it like that, fine. But if you're ever going to upload it to any source, before you do, check your local drive. And then that local drive is going to be where you're going to rename the file. So if you're going to rename the file, if the topic is mental health awareness tips, for example, that should be the name of the file name .mp3. That's the first serious way of podcasting. Because if I'm going to title this podcast that topic, or I'm going to say, oh, episode 1, this, but the file name is completely missing, then who are you really serving to? Because the algorithm is receiving from libraries, from databases, from structures that have importance. That's why when somebody puts a logo, they put a trademark, they put something that is of value. When someone sees that, they respect the badge, they respect the sign, they respect the authority. So when you do that, the respect also comes in from the algorithm, because you're going to ask ChatGPT, Alexa, Siri, Google, Microsoft about a question that you're expecting a response from. So who is that response coming from? And who is being responded to by the algorithm? That is where the source file comes in. Yesterday, I talked about 3 things. There's a source, there's a resource, and there's resources. Those are 3 banks. There's a source, there's a resource, there are resources. A source is your domain, is your website. Right now, if you're running an ad on Spotify, there's no way you can put a website URL to facebook.com. They're not going to allow you because you don't own facebook.com. You have to put your website.com because that's where the landing page is going to be. So you can put spotify.com because it's not your domain. It's been owned by somebody else. It's a property. When you think about domains as properties. Like I have a house. This is my house online. I feel like if we started saying, "Oh, do you have a website?" No. Do you have a house online? It sounds better than "Do you have a website?" Because a website sounds like, "Yeah, I have a website. I don't really, yeah." It's like saying I have a house, but I don't really. Mm, you don't say the same thing because you value what you have. So when you value what you have, you appreciate the value that you keep. So when you're podcasting seriously, you're podcasting and you're putting in a house. When you put stuff in a house, when you do things in your house, it's because you want to put a vase here, you want to put a lampstand here, you want to put a TV here, you want to put a bed here, you want to put a couch here, you want to put something here, something there, because that's how you seriously want to show how your house looks from the outside in. So when you do the same thing for your podcast, you're uploading episodes every time you upload an episode with the name of the MP3. That is so important because if I upload and the episode is episode underscore one underscore 23457 dot MP3 and I upload that, there's no way at all you will be seen. Yeah, you'll be seen if somebody searches for you, but if let's say there are 4.5 million podcasts in the world. So for you to even think about scaling, you have to be building a ladder. So instead of building a ladder, think about it this way. I have the perfect analogy. If you're building a ladder, right? If you're building a ladder without keywords, you're building a ladder with sand. If you're building a ladder and that ladder has structure and that structure has keywords, meaning that from your file name to even the photo that you're uploading, let's say you have a guest on your show and that's something you're uploading, right? Even with YouTube, when you're uploading an image, you're uploading an image as a thumbnail. It's a JPEG, it's a PNG, it's a WebP. These are file extensions that actually speak or explain, or I would say comprehensively adapt to the ecosystem and now translate information that allows whoever is searching through the web to find the resource within that file and then process what's needed to make sure that the experience is fully served from an end-to-end user standpoint. So if I'm uploading an image file and that image file has the keywords, I'm uploading an MP3 file, it has the keywords. I'm uploading a YouTube file, an MP4 file, that is with the same keywords. That means I've just uploaded 3 different multimedia formats, right? JPEG or PNG, MP3, and MP4. They have the same keywords and they're being all uploaded to the same web. Let me say it like that. But they're identically connected because they're also semantically balanced. Welcome, Nikki. So when you're creating these things seriously, hello, you're adding business value and brand value because the algorithm doesn't know you. It's like a baby. When you have a baby and the baby's growing, they're getting to see you, their eyes open, they don't know you, but they can hear you, they can feel you, they understand, they can feel your presence because it's an emotion, right? That's the same thing you're treating with your website. Because when you start posting content on your website, when you start posting podcasts, when you start posting content and letting people know about you, whether it's on Pinterest, whether it's on a podcast, whether it's on a website, whether it's on a social platform, wherever it is, as long as it's on and live, that is where you're receiving signals from. So the algorithm has no clue about you because you have one episode, but there are other episodes talking about the same thing you have. So how am I going to know you out of all these things? Like saying, how do I know this baby out of all these babies? Like, which one is mine? So there's going to be a distinction between them because of what you offer and how you offer. So when you think about offering content in a way that is given in a very robust manner, then you're creating content that people can see, and that file name is something that people can receive. So you're doing 2 things. Those are kind of like 2 counts. One count is you're uploading a file name to a web server that's going to keep you as an authority. Because keep this in mind too. Anytime you post content online, you're the author. It's either you have a profile, like a personal profile or professional profile, or you have a company profile. It's one of the two. You either have a personal bank account or a business bank account. So When you think about the two, you ask yourself, I'm the author of this content. How will my content be seen if my content is received? If it's received in a great way, then that means if somebody searches for my name on Google, I have somewhere as a source, which is my website, that tells someone about the resource they're looking for, because this resource is in form of a link. The resources are the platforms that is also represented on. So you podcast seriously by uploading the right file name to the right place. The second thing to do, there are 3 points. The second thing to do if you want to podcast seriously is to think about your distribution market, right? These are things that I'll be talking about in the podcast seriously. This is going to be a very heavy training, and I've been building this for a while now, and I'm like, yeah, I have been taking some time to just say, when is it time to do this? And I feel like it's time. And I searched about and I said, yeah, this definitely makes a lot of sense, because I've been podcasting for 6 years and I've made a lot of mistakes. I'm not perfect. I'm still learning. I'm still growing. There are things I'm like, okay, yeah, I should do better there. I should do better here. So I always like to work on myself, because, that way I'm carving out things and I'm making things out of things that I'm creating. So I can't tell you, hey, I'm the best part. No, never. I'm learning as much as you are, and we're learning together as we grow. And if I don't learn, I don't know. The more I know, the more I don't know. So when I think about my podcast journey, 6 years now in August, I'm like, wow, this is a lot of time. So if I can help someone achieve what I've achieved in 6 years in 1 year, I've saved them 5 years of research or experience. And I've put that into a training, because when I show you this is what you need to do, this is what you need to do, go to this website, do this, do that, then for me now it's like, okay, this is a rinse and repeat. Because if you have a podcast and you have a podcast and you use the same platform, you're both going to search for two different keywords, but you're going to find the same database that will give you the same results, that will get you to the same platforms that you're looking to be on, whether it's YouTube or Apple or Spotify or Amazon. You can be there. Whenever you set up your podcast, make sure that you have a file name that is also accessible for the web, right? That's one. We talked about that. Number two, how to podcast seriously: distribution, distribution, distribution. Without distribution, your podcast is not going anywhere. It's just a fact. That is something I learned early in my podcast journey. That's why anytime we start a podcast, we make sure that we submit your podcast to platforms, because it's like, I don't know how to describe this. If we don't do that, then we're pretty much singing to the wall. Let me say it like that. We're singing to the wall and we're getting a reflection from the wall. We're hearing ourselves, we're hearing an echo, but that echo is you, because you're not reflecting, or that echo is not being echoed out because there's no distribution channel. So if you have the echo is your voice, it's your vibe, it's your vibration. So if you're able to do that in a quick succession, right, then your mindset is going to be something that's going to give you, I would say, like a foresight on how you're going to see the same thing long term. So if you're creating a platform for a podcast, every podcast has an RSS feed. What does RSS feed stand for? Really simple syndication. Really simple syndication. That's what RSS feed stands for. Really simple syndication. So whenever you hear, do you have an RSS feed? Someone's technically asking, do you have a really simple syndication file that I can copy and paste into my system so that I can distribute what you have on my system? It's like distributing oranges to different markets. Like, oh, Walmart, Trader Joe's, Target, name them, Whole Foods. You're distributing oranges to all these different stores, because all these different stores have different types of people that visit these different types of stores. So if I'm only submitting to Trader Joe's, then there's no way somebody that goes to Whole Foods can experience my podcast or my orange because I don't have that available for them to see. It's not in view, out of sight, out of mind. So if I have my podcast distributed to this show, this website, this domain, this platform, it never ends. It never ends. But when you do it the first time and you do it correctly, especially when you connect to the top four, which is Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and this is not in any order, Amazon. If you have these four, you're going to be safe. Better safe than sorry. Because if you have a podcast and you only use your podcast on YouTube, or you only use your podcast on SoundCloud, or you only use your podcast on a course platform, then you're actually doing yourself a disservice because you're paying for those domains, you're paying for those things, and you're not getting echoes, you're not getting response, you're not getting feedback. Podcast is not supposed to be a one-way street. It's supposed to be a two-way street. Early on, when I started podcasting, I felt like nobody's going to listen to my voice. No one's going to listen to my podcast. No one's going to listen to this episode. Why am I even trying? I started off, I think I started a podcast first. I called it Play Flav. The very first time I started a podcast. And then my RSS feed, for some reason, it just didn't show up again. I was like, wait, this is the devil. I need to start. Something is blocking me from doing this thing. Let me start this thing again. And I was like, wait, why am I giving energy to this thing when I know I can do it better? So I was like, nah, why is my podcast not even showing up? And I was like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna do this again. So I had to start a whole new podcast because apparently my RSS feed could not load, nothing could happen. I was confused. I called support. I was like, this is weird. This was back in 20 end of 2018. So I was like, you know what? This podcast, I need to start it. If I don't start this podcast, I don't know. And this was a year before COVID. This was 2019. I started this podcast in August because whenever I feel something, and then it feels from within, I'm like, I got to do this. I go with it. I go with my gut. I pray about it. I'm like, okay, this is the way to go. Bet I'm gonna do it because you don't know what's gonna happen on the other side. Boom, podcast shows up. Then Clubhouse shows up. If it wasn't for me podcasting in 2019, I would be on Clubhouse in 2020. So everything happens for a reason. Nothing happens by happenstance. So when I meet people, when I connect with people, you never know when you're gonna meet people tomorrow. So just be a good person, and that way you can sleep peacefully, be at peace with everybody, right? So when you have a podcast, when you have these kind of things, it's gonna allow you to become expressive. One of the things I'm noticing with podcasting now is people are using a podcast as therapy. This is new. So I don't want to go too deep into this. So if you really want to podcast seriously, your distribution channels, thank you, Valerie, your distribution channels have to be very on point. So when you submit to it's free. It's free. Podcasting is free. Where the cost comes in is the marketing, the distribution, the research, the branding, everything up on top of that. Website, all those things. That's where the cost comes. But podcasting is free. My first podcast episode was not official. It was so unofficial. My first podcast episode, you can go and listen to it. It's everywhere. My first podcast episode was a replay from an IGTV video, which I did as a live video on Instagram. That's how that first episode, that's how I started. From there, I have a whole microphone because I moved from music. So I know about sound, but I was like, podcast is different from music. How do I even submit to Apple? How do I go to Spotify? Those were my questions. Even when I started music early on, like, because this is 2 decades in music, I started back in '05. So I was like, how do you submit to Apple Music? How do you submit? This was when it was iTunes back in the day. So I'm like, how do you submit to iTunes? How do you submit? I was doing research and I was like, voila, that's how you do it. Okay. So I'm self-taught. I taught myself how to play the drums, how to swim, how to cook, how to do all these things, SEO. So I'm just grateful that I'm always learning because it just keeps me refreshed. Pinterest. These are things that I'm connecting the dots. I'm like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, why not? Okay, bet. So I was like, podcasting is like music. So if I don't distribute my music to the right channels, the right radio stations, the right DJs, to the right publishers, to the right labels, there's no way I'm going to get seen or heard. So same thing applies to podcasting. That's a big thing. So distribute your podcast out there. Let people listen to your podcast. Let people connect with your podcast, right? When people connect with your podcast, it helps. If somebody's listening to your podcast and they're driving to work and they listen to you for 15 minutes because you showed up as an ad, then you know that that person cares about what they listen to. It's hard to get impressions on Instagram, on TikTok. Like, when you see impressions, oh, I have 100 impressions, 500 impressions. It's hard to get 1,000, 10,000, 20,000 impressions if you're not running ads organically on social media. But it's very easy to get that on a podcast, on ads, on a website, because those are things that you can control, quality control. So if you want to podcast seriously in 2025 and beyond and be above, distribute seriously. So your file name is number one. How do you keep the file name? So let me give you a little, I'll call it a plot twist. I think I'll call it a plot twist. Okay. So here's something that this is like a part B of section 1. For you to put a file name in your file type, in other words, for you to put a keyword into your media local drive, whether it's a website link, or which is a URL, welcome's easy, or it is a word or a keyword, let me be more specific. Those are going to be specific things that you're going to have to add, right? Within the file name and the file type. Now, for you to know exactly what keywords people are searching for, or how do you talk on the app? How do you talk? Because what you're also saying is keywords. Because if I let's say, it's very possible. Try this out. I'm gonna give you a task to try out. Try this out. Check this out if you want to. And I feel like this is going to be very proactive. If you use Apple Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts is now, it's not only restricted to Apple. So if you have a Mac, you can, do Apple Podcasts and, check it out. If you go to Apple Podcasts and you go to an episode, right? Go to an episode that has a script enabled. Like when you listen to music have lyrics. Now for podcasts, it's script, right? So if there's a script and you're following through that script when you're listening on Apple Podcasts, at the very bottom of your screen, you're going to see a search bar. That search bar is going to give you a little section where you can type in a keyword. So let's say you're listening to a podcast about, like this now, is how to podcast seriously. Now, if the number of times I've said podcast, if I type in the word podcast on search on Apple Podcasts and I type in the word podcast, it's going to tell me the number of times the word podcast was said on this podcast episode. So the more times I say the word podcast, the higher the number count increases. So think about your word count like podcast. If I say podcast again, then I've said it already twice. So I'll say it one more time, podcast. So if you say the word podcast, and for every time you say the word podcast, you hear a bell, that means that the word count is increasing within the timeline of the episode. So if person A has a 30-minute episode and said the word podcast 100 times, and person B has a 30-minute episode and said the word podcast 10 times, same length, different depth, same length, different depth, because the keyword density of me saying the word podcast has allowed me to go above the threshold of how many times the word podcast is said. So if someone's looking for how to podcast, how to start a podcast, this podcast will be a podcast episode that will be suggested because the word podcast was there. If I want to do email marketing better or email marketing best practices, then my podcast will be there because I talked about it once upon a time. So for you to get those keywords, I said the word podcast 10 times in my last episode. You see, there you go. So when you think about the number of times you say that, and that is the focus of the episode. If you're talking about a certain topic, it could be anything. It could be toys, it could be water, it could be headphones, it could be anything. It could be products, softwares, especially softwares. The more you say that software name, that's branding there because you keep saying that word over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. It's like a broken record. Before you know it, it's like repeating a song on steroids all day. Imagine listening to one song all day for the same number of cycles. That's a lot of streams. So that's going to trigger the algorithm say, hey, this song is important. Somebody's listening to this song. Let's suggest this song to somebody who listens to songs like this. So if you have a podcast and they say, like Netflix, like if you watch a show, it says based on this show, here are shows that you can watch. Same thing happens with podcasts. So imagine you being suggested on somebody else's podcast because you said something related to what the connections are. So how to distribute is allowing you to get into these looks and crannies, but the keywords is allowing you to get closer to their need. So there's a website I want to share with you that is free and is free. Freely given, freely give. There's a website called Ivy, ivy.fm. Ivy, Ivy, like poison ivy, Ivy, ivy.fm is a website. Go there. You're going to see a lot of things about podcasts. There are 4.5 million podcasts in the world, and ivy.fm only gets 1 million podcasts out of the 4.5, meaning that, and that makes sense because I would say at least less than 18% of podcasts are active out of 4.5 million. So it makes sense. They have a database, they have a server. They're not going to be using space or paying money for space that they can't use, especially when they're podcasts that are dormant. It's like a bank account that's not been used for 10 years. You wouldn't want to keep that. So it's the same thing with the podcast. So they've pretty much sourced out the top podcasts out of the 4.5 million that are doing well. So you can use this platform as a keyword discovery for your file name. That's why I kind of gave you a plot twist. So, for example, let's see, somebody put in the chat a keyword. Anybody put a keyword that you want to talk about on your podcast or just in a show. Wine. Shay, okay, here we go. Boom, bingo. All right, so I'm gonna pick the first three. So I see wine, Shay, I see self-love, Valerie. Okay, all right, let's start with this one. So wine, Ivy.fm tells me, right, there's one, two, three. All right, so let me say this real quick before I even go too deep. How do I say this? Like Google. You know, when you go to Google and you search for spa near me or restaurant near me or hotel near me, you normally get three options, right? You get the top three, like gold, silver, bronze. The same thing applies to podcasts, right? There's gold, silver, bronze. And it might interchange in between time because today Joe Rogan's podcast might be the top. Tomorrow, Mel Robbins' podcast might be the top. The next day, somebody else might be on top. It happens, right? So you're never always going to be on top. But if you're part of that percentage, it's like a plane. When you have an international flight and a local flight, the altitudes are different, right? The longitudes and the latitudes are different. So when you think about moving from one sphere to the other, when you pass a certain sphere, within that sphere, you're operating within that atmosphere. Let me be more specific. So if you're on a podcast, you want to have a podcast that is within that atmosphere. So right now with wine, there are three that I see that are really doing well, and they're all three crazy ones. There's wine and crime, there's wine and spirits, and then there's wine and weed. Don't ask me why, but that's what I see. Now, under that, I see the number of episodes. I know, right? The number of episodes and the number of podcasts. And then one thing that is really nice about Ivy, it's like a dictionary. So it says wine. What is wine? It says there are 72,150 episodes, 20,316 podcasts talking about wine. What is wine? Wine is an alcoholic drink made by fermentation of grapes. So even though you're looking for topics, it's going to tell you that. So if you have a podcast, my first podcast episode will be what is wine? Because people don't know the difference between red and white, sweet and dry, alcoholic, non-alcoholic. It keeps getting more and more and more like taste, buds, everything, glasses. How do you even hold a glass, a wine glass? It goes deep into those topics. So there's so much you can really like drill down. So when I see this and I see the 72,000 episodes, I see wineries, winemaker, wine tasting, wine festival, the list goes on and on. So now I'm going to click on wine because Shay said wine. Now, when I see wine, there are 22,286 podcasts, 82,513 episodes. The average duration time for a podcast episode talking about wine is 45 minutes, and there are 10 daily new episodes. And I think around between middle of 2020 and beginning of 2021 was when a lot of people were buying wine, from what I see from the popularity. Then I see it's in the arts category, it's 17%. In the food category, it's 14%. In the society and culture, it's 11%. In the business, it's 6%, education, 4%, other 42%. And then it tells me different related topics: food, beer, California, comedy, wineries, spirits, music, grapes, alcohol, France, tea, organic drawing. There's a lot of things in here. And then when you scroll down, it says, here are the best podcasts about wine. Now I'm seeing 916 episodes, 462 episodes, and even shows the shows that talk about it. And the latest episode that went out about wine was today, May 2nd, 2025. And who actually, yeah, I see the episode. A lot of people are talking about it. Even Yahoo Finance talked about it today. This is like the Google of podcasts. So you can use ivy.fm, see what's trending, see what's happening, and then you now decide, okay, my file name is going to say wine, or if it's going to say, for example, why shouldn't we turn up our noses at New Zealand's Sauvignon Blanc? Exactly. The Guardian just talked about that yesterday. So these are Yahoo News is talking about that. Australia's surge in wine exports to China begins to slow down. You see, so whether it's news, style, whatever it is, it's up to you to decide how you're going to use your podcast to, talk about that. So podcasting is great, and that's how you can really go into it, Shay. So thank you for that feedback. That was really good. Um, Valerie's self-love. We're going to do this because we'll be wrapping up in 7 minutes. So self-love. All right, here we go. So self-love. There are three episodes. Three podcasts. There's the self-love fix, there is Self Love Babe, and there's the Self Love Breakfast Club. So let me say this real quick. When you see this podcast, these are triggers that should tell you, hey, I'm in the wine industry. I'm in the self love industry. I'm in the real estate industry. I'm in the music industry. I'm in the dash industry. And let me go to these podcasts and see if they have a website and if they allow guests. Let me be on that show as a guest. And then when you're on the show as a guest, sometimes when you're on the show as a guest, sometimes the guests, I mean, let me say it this way. Sometimes the hosts don't know how to put your website on their show notes because they're promoting themselves, they're talking about you, but they're not linking to you on their podcast. And that's where a big rookie mistake is, because and that's what I learned early on in my podcasting. Because when you're featured on a show and you're not highlighted or linked to, hey, check out their LinkedIn or check out their website, and it's not put on that show, then it's just audio. It's like the echoes we talked about. There's no vibration. It's just bzz, it's just there. It's not really doing anything. So if you have a flow whereby you're able to link back and forth, it'll help. So reach out to these people as well. There are 56,754 episodes on self love. There are 18,732 podcasts on self love. What is self love? Self love is a concept in philosophy and psychology. Remember when I said this is a dictionary? It's not just, hey, keywords. Check out this platform, Self Love. The last episode was yesterday. The average duration of a podcast on self love is 34 minutes. And then there are a lot of episodes talking about it. And you can see them right here, different, topics, different places. Now, when you go to this type of platforms and you see this is one way that will help you to connect with people, write things correctly, use these keywords, and then scale. Because for me, of course, there's some podcast episodes that I started off when I started that are not as good as the ones that I'm recently updating or publishing because I wasn't as good as I was now than when I was there then. In my first year podcasting, I would do the same thing I was doing then, and it wouldn't be what I'm doing now because I didn't know what I know now. So it's we grow, we learn, we move. So the things that I'm doing now within this podcast, seriously, sign up, you get a live training, and you have access to a podcast course. And I'm going to be doing them in three different tiers. There's going to be an online self-study. You can do it on your own. There's going to be one with training, and there's going to be one in person. So there are three. And I've been praying about this, thinking about this, and I feel like now it's time to talk about it. So this is the first time I've really brought this out. So things you're hearing about me talk about today, we'll do those in the workshops. And we'll be doing those things as you learn them, as you do them on your own, as we do them together, or as we do them for you, so that when you now see your podcast showing up in different countries, don't be surprised because you're actually connecting with people who are connecting with you. Podcast is a two-way street. It's not a one-way street. So I hope this helped you. I know it was a lot. It was a mouthful. It's a Friday. It's a new day. It's a blessed day. And I appreciate you all for being here. Valerie, Lynette, Monty, Shay, Nick, Ishman, Beston. I just saw your notification. So thank you so much. I look forward to connecting with you. Robson, Angie, Richard, Cruz, Zizi, thank you for being here. Please follow me. I'm following you back. I'm big on music. If you need have a podcast and you want your music for your podcast, reach out to me. I'll make some original sounds for you. And next week, I'm going to be talking about breaking down Spotify ads, how to run Spotify ads as a podcaster. So there are things that you'll be getting exclusively in this podcast seriously training. I mean, right now you can hear what I'm talking about and gain, but I know that, when you acquire new information, listening acquires about 5% of acquisition. But if you can teach somebody else, that's 90% of acquisition. Just like for me, I'm a self-taught drummer. I can teach somebody else how to drum because I taught myself. But if somebody taught me how to drum, I need to teach myself more so that I can teach somebody else because it's not a practice that I do. So now that I do it naturally, it's an innate thing. It's like, hey, sticks, legs, move, head, this and that. It just makes more sense. So yeah, that's my TED talk for the day. But I appreciate you for being here, and I hope you learned something. You please check out the replay. If you want to connect with me, please feel free to do so. And if you also want to listen to the podcast, go to we don't play podcast.com. That's where you can get all the podcast episodes live and ready to go. I have an episode I actually published an episode today. I connected with somebody all the way from Bosnia. That's a faraway country from the US. And it's always great to connect people all over the world. We're in 144 countries, and it's a blessing to be a blessing. So when you're able to do things like this at capacities like this large, just do good and be good. So I appreciate you. Have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy, y'all. Stay safe, stay hydrated, and stay motivated, stay blessed, and I'll see you guys on Monday. If you're here on Monday, I'm here on Monday at 7 a.m. Central in the Breakfast with Champions. I usually have a 30-minute segment every Monday morning. So please catch me there if you're available, and I'm gonna see you guys soon. So take care and enjoy your weekend.